Hey there everyone, welcome back to Utility Sports. We've got more news to cover in the NBA after the Toronto Raptors made headlines yesterday in a Pascal Siakam trade to the Indiana Pacers. They got back a pretty important player, a player who was a key part of Denver's championship team just last playoffs, and that is Bruce Brown. He goes to Toronto in what was essentially a salary matching move for the Indiana Pacers en route to bringing Pascal Siakam to Indiana. So now the question is left to be asked, what do the Raptors do with Bruce Brown? Do they trade him? Do they keep him? My current assumption is he gets rerouted nearly immediately. It might not be exactly immediately, but they're going to trade him, and I think they're going to trade him relatively quickly because it only makes sense. A rebuilding team, I just don't know if there's a real role for Bruce Brown next to an RJ Barrett, next to a Scotty Barnes. He's a good player, and I think because of that, there's going to be a lot of interest from contenders around the league. If you guys are new to Utility Sports, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content. Without further ado, let's get into it here with the video preview, focusing on 8 brand new Bruce Brown trades. Of course, we've been more focused on, hey, what's going to happen with Siakam? What's going to happen with Zach LaVine? What's going to happen with a bunch of different teams? We have a whole entire prediction for every single team on the channel right now. Make sure to go check that out after this one. But in this video, the 8 brand new Bruce Brown trades, the offers will improve throughout the video. So by the end of the video, I have what I gauge should be the best offer at the very end, so that we kind of have a good idea, a good baseline of, hey, how competitive is this offer compared to other offers the Raptors might receive for Brown this trade deadline. The Raptors, this is a very important rule. The Raptors cannot aggregate other salaries with Brown. Because of that, every single trade, you're going to see Bruce Brown being the sole piece that the Raptors give up. Now, it is important to note, maybe the Raptors could attach draft picks to him. They just can't send other salaries, and maybe they make a buy move trading Bruce Brown. I don't see that being the case. I would be pretty surprised if that happens. In this video, I do not have any of those style of trades. Comment down below if you think there's a trade like that that makes some sense. Otherwise, just comment some other theoretical trades. Maybe it's a buy move, maybe it's a sell move. Let me know down in the comment section below what you think is going to happen with Bruce Brown. And then in the actual video, we're going to give quick analysis on why I think Brown makes sense for the team that I have trading for him. Again, 8 teams in this video. And then ultimately, we'll give the breakdown on the return for the Raptors, as what are they going to do with Bruce Brown is really the big question. Let's get into it here with trade number 1. In this one, I have Bruce Brown going to the Houston Rockets. The reason I think Bruce Brown makes a lot of sense for Houston specifically is, one, it doesn't cost them a ton in terms of salaries. They have a bunch of matching salaries that they could use to get a deal like this done in a trade with the Toronto Raptors, and he would be a pretty significant upgrade to their bench unit, specifically when you look at their defensive presence and the way Ime Udoka wants to play. I think Bruce Brown could give them some good physicality. Right now, they are playing Amen Thompson a pretty good amount. They're playing Cam Whitmore a bit, and I love seeing those young guys on the floor. But just given the nature of NBA basketball, if you want to win, if you want to try and make a playoff push, it's hard to be playing 2 rookies significant minutes. So I think a Bruce Brown addition could probably help this team take a small step forward toward the back end of the season. Not really sure that they're the biggest suitor though, and because of that, they're not offering as much as other teams. For the Raptors here, you're getting expiring salaries in Victor Oladipo, Aaron Holiday, and Jock Landale. I know that contract there says 4 years left on Landale. That is not really true. The final 3 years are all non-guaranteed. So if the Raptors really wanted to operate that way, they could free up some cap space for this next offseason, get out of the luxury tax, and kind of finagle their way to saving some money. And in return for Brown, they also get 4 second-round picks, one this year via the Brooklyn Nets. That might be a top 40 pick in this year's draft. You're also getting 2 second-rounders in 2026 and a second-rounder in 2027. This isn't a great accumulation of assets. Again, this is what I would deem to be the worst offer of the entire bunch, but it is still 4 second-round picks, kind of similar to what we saw Jay Crowder get traded for last trade deadline when the Milwaukee Bucks sent 5 second-rounders to the Phoenix Suns for his services. This is kind of a similar style deal. Now, I think Brown, just given the fact that he's a bit younger and just so recently impacted a championship winning team, that his value is going to be a little bit higher. Again, this is the worst offer of the bunch, one that I don't ultimately think the Raptors would accept, and I just don't see the Rockets being willing to offer a first-round pick for Bruce Brown, given where they're at in their rebuild and kind of how early on it still is with their young guys' development. So going on to trade number 2, we have the LA Clippers here. And I think Bruce Brown actually makes a ton of sense for the Clippers, because one thing I think that this team is lacking is a little bit of grit and toughness and attitude. They have a ton of talent. James Harden, one of the most talented players in NBA history. Kawhi Leonard is a proven two-time Finals MVP, NBA champion, one of the best players again to ever play on an NBA floor. Paul George is probably the silkiest, smoothest wing of all time. The way that that guy moves, operates, handles the basketball, play makes, and finishes around the rim, as well as his shooting. I mean, just dominant. But the Clippers, I still think, could use a little bit more of that grit, that toughness, like I mentioned. And I think Bruce Brown gives you that. He gives you a little bit of a competitive edge. And I think a fire that the Clippers could probably use in their locker room a little bit more, especially given the price that it's going to take, because the Clippers also get a little bit of flexibility here. And I think a big goal for them, given the fact that we're heading toward the full implementation of the new CBA with a second apron team being heavily restricted, the Clippers have a chance right now to strike on a trade where they open up some pathways here to getting a guy who will not only help them this year, but they could also keep on their roster going into next season, and that would be Bruce Brown specifically. For the Raptors, what do you get? PJ Tucker heads north of the border. Very likely you could see him routed to a third team. If not, maybe he would get bought out. There's some rumors right now that the Wizards could be a potential buyout team, where Michael Winger, former Clippers GM, now president of the Wizards, would possibly be helping out the Clippers in a deal like that. We'll have to kind of monitor that situation and see what goes on there. Mason Plumlee, $5 million this season, a guy who, listen, he's not going to be a key part for the Raptors, but again, expiring contract. You do get a couple young stabs here. Bones Highland, former 26th overall pick in the 2021 draft. He's still really young, and I think a lot of people have sold their stock on him. Out of VCU, he's a deep-range shot maker. Now, listen, he shoots some inefficient shots. The shot selection is not always what you would want it to be for a point guard, but he does give you some floor spacing. I think that could help Toronto if they do decide to keep him, and you get a high upside swing in BJ Boston, a former top recruit. Was a second-round pick by the Clippers. Probably came out of college a little premature. Wasn't really NBA ready when he decided to come out, but he is still an interesting target nonetheless because of his shot making. He's an interesting player. I've watched him work out up close and personal in person. He's an impressive workout to watch because of his size, length, and handle, and his ability to knock down some perimeter shots. If you're going to give some of these guys some opportunities, a guy like Brandon Boston does make some sense. You also get 2 second-round picks in this deal. And again, my assumption is you can maybe reroute PJ Tucker somewhere else in a trade. Again, not one of the best offers, but I still think a couple young pieces in here, some second-round picks, could help move the needle for sure. Move on to our third offer now, and it is one with the Phoenix Suns. I think the Phoenix Suns are a desperate team, and a team that, hey, look, we know Bruce Brown can work with Kevin Durant. In fact, we've seen it in Brooklyn when the two of them were together. One of the most shocking moves to me a couple of off seasons ago was when the Nets decided to not retain Bruce Brown. In fact, went a different direction, and that was followed up with a Kevin Durant trade request, not specifically because of the absence of Brown, but I just think the lack of talent around him, and I think losing a key player like Bruce Brown does contribute to that fact. So for the Suns, you're getting a player like that who is defensive-minded, although sometimes not the best defensive player actually, but he, applies himself on that end of the floor. He is a little undersized for the way that you would typically use him, but I think in Phoenix he could be a good screen-setting guard, help maybe free up Devin Booker and Kevin Durant on occasion. It doesn't really contribute to the Suns' need for size and a little bit more strength in the front court, but he does play like a wing. He does play like a forward just with how he's built. Pretty strong player. So Bruce Brown theoretically could help Phoenix in that regard. And then when it comes to Toronto, this is a better return, still not great. You're getting Nasir Little's salary, which is, I would say, not a great salary to have on your roster. You're getting Grayson Allen, who's an expiring, actually, I think a pretty solid player. Maybe this is another situation where you route him to a third team. Again, I have to say that out loud so everyone hears me. You would route Grayson Allen to a third team here, probably get a couple more assets in the door for him. I'm sure some team would be interested in adding him. Maybe even the Milwaukee Bucks would have interest in adding him back into their rotation. We'll have to see if something like that materializes. Damian Lee, Yuta Watanabe in here to make the money work, and 4 second-round picks. So with the Grayson Allen inclusion, you're looking at probably really 5, 6, maybe even 7 second-round picks of value if you break everything down. It's not elite value. It's probably not fair value for Bruce Brown. Again, these are some of the lower value trades. In this video, we are going to have some trades with first-round picks, so hold patient with me, Raptors fans. It's kind of a spectrum of offers that you're going to get this trade deadline for a player like Bruce Brown and that $22 million salary. Now we look at a deal with the New York Knicks, and this is where things start to make a bit more sense. We've already seen the Raptors and Knicks make a trade this year centered around OG Anunoby, Emmanuel Quickley, and RJ Barrett. And this time, well, the Knicks are buying some more. Things have changed in Toronto. They now have Bruce Brown, and I think the Knicks would have some interest in Bruce Brown, adding another player who I think fits the Knicks' identity, the way that their team is built. He's another good cutter, a good screen setter, which is unique again as a guard position, guard size player. I think those are things that could help New York, especially now that they are kind of feeling a little bit the absence of Emmanuel Quickley off of their bench from the guard spot. I think Brown could help them a bit in that area. Although he's not a natural scorer, he's somebody who, I think benefits your team offensively by doing a lot of the little things. And then for Toronto, you're getting Evan Fournier's salary, which is a team option for next year. So that's a nice contract that you're able to get off of at the end of the season if you do decide to. And then you're getting a player in Quentin Grimes, who I do think has a pretty good amount of value around the league. He's a young player who I think is honestly, if you had to give him a comparison, he's maybe the next Bruce Brown, maybe a little bit better, probably a better shooter than Bruce Brown, a little bit more reliable in that area, but honestly kind of built similarly. I think do some similar things on both ends of the floor in terms of kind of secondary, tertiary playmaking to a certain extent. The fanspo names and roles and archetypes for these players are always so funny, like movement shooter for Quentin Grimes and stationary shooter for Bruce Brown. I wouldn't necessarily label them as such, although they do some of those things on occasion. And then you also get 2 second-round picks here in 2024. Again, not the strongest trade here for the Raptors, but I think once you have Quentin Grimes in there, you're getting a bit closer to what the expectation is in a Bruce Brown trade package. Moving on to our next trade, and this is where things start to get interesting. We have Bruce Brown going to the Golden State Warriors, which I think is an upgrade for them. Also gives them a little bit of cap relief, which is super important for a team that far into the tax. That $2 million difference will end up being about a $12 to $18 million difference, depending on what other moves they make. It gives them some flexibility. They open up a trade exception as well through this, which is important. And then the Raptors here get Andrew Wiggins. So you're bringing all the Canadians back to Canada, which is super exciting. They already have done so with RJ Barrett. You get another one here in Andrew Wiggins, and you hope bringing him back home, bringing him to his home country will specifically let Maple Jordan maybe become Maple Jordan. He's had really great stints in his career, Wiggins has. He's had moments with the Minnesota Timberwolves where he looked like he was going to be the next hot thing. He had moments with the Golden State Warriors in 2022 where they don't win a finals without him. And while I don't necessarily think he's the best fit with Toronto, and I don't necessarily think that he is as good as that 2022 run had people believing, I do think there will be some interest in him around the league despite his rather long contract. He's got 3 years after this season at $20+ million a year. It's a pretty good financial commitment to make, but if you're Toronto, you haven't historically signed a bunch of free agents, and maybe a guy like Wiggins, if you get him back into the right situation, right area, and kind of the right mindset with all of the off-court stuff he's been dealing with, it would be a home run for them if they can maybe finagle that, as well as 4 second-round picks with him. So really, you're trading Brown for Wiggins. You could argue is maybe an upgrade on talent for Toronto. For the Warriors, you argue that it's an upgrade in actual production this year, and also probably fit on the roster with his ability to set screens. I think it would weaponize Curry a bit more if you're hunting certain matchups, which the Warriors have become a little bit more predatory over the last couple of years. So I think it's a decently balanced trade. If I'm Toronto, I would at least have some interest in this, especially if I feel like cap space and future flexibility is not in the cards. Then I think this is something Masai Ujiri would look at and consider. Then we go on to our next one, and here we are. First round picks are now finally on the table with some of these teams, and one of them is the Philadelphia 76ers, a team that is hungry to win, and I think Bruce Brown makes a ton of sense for Philadelphia for a few reasons. First of all, if you look at the matchups that they're going to have to play in the playoffs to try and make it to the NBA Finals or even the conference finals for the first time of Joel Embiid's career, you're going to have to beat some good teams. You're going to have to beat the Boston Celtics, potentially, which means you have to have someone to guard Jason Tatum or Jaylen Brown or Derek White or one of the other great players in Boston's roster right now. Bruce Brown could theoretically help you with that. He's, again, strong, physical, nice build. He's able to probably muscle up with a guy like Jason Tatum on occasion, gives you another body to throw at a guy like that, which could be pretty important, and also helps kind of strengthen the back end of the 76ers rotation by kind of shuffling everybody back down a spot. I think it does strengthen their backcourt in general as well. Gives you a winning player who was, again, instrumental in the playoffs last year, and who knows, if you match up with the Denver Nuggets in the NBA Finals, maybe you have a little bit of an advantage there because he'll know some of their sets. He knows how Nikola Jokic likes to catch the basketball. He knows all of those things. So that's going to be an impactful situation here as well. And then for Toronto, you're getting Marcus Morris's expiring salary, Furkan Korkmaz's expiring salary. Those two guys don't matter. That's just purely in here for salary reasons. You get Jaden Springer, who I still think there's a lot to get out of from him yet. Former Tennessee Volunteer. He's athletic. He's a defensive-minded guard who I think can guard probably 1 through 3 at the NBA level. He's super quick and athletic. And you get a 2026 first-round pick. This pick was in the James Harden trade that the 76ers executed with the LA Clippers. From this deal, they were able to get, of course, a couple of picks. And now one of those picks goes back out here to Toronto, where you're now, if you're kind of including the whole entire Siakam trade, you now, instead of getting 3 first-round picks, you get 4 first-round picks and also Jaden Springer in the deal. So that's something that I think is, again, we're kind of at the low end of the spectrum of, hey, this is a first-round pick because it's not very valuable likely, but it's still a first-round pick regardless. Moving on to our next offer, and this is one I absolutely love for the team getting Bruce Brown. It's with the Oklahoma City Thunder, and I don't think there's a better fit in the NBA for Bruce Brown than Oklahoma City besides the Denver Nuggets, and I just don't see a way the Denver Nuggets make a trade for Brucey B. So because of that, I think the Thunder are the next best thing. And why is Oklahoma City such a good team for them? Well, they run a ton of flex action, and if you're not sure exactly what flex action is, well, it typically has a lot of guards screening for backdoor cuts off the opposite weak side part of the floor, and it also has a lot of down screens. And I think Bruce Brown, again, as a guard, he just gives you a unique physique and something that with Oklahoma City hunting a bunch of matchups, a lot of guard-to-guard screens, small-to-small screens, just doing a lot of weird, unique things that Mark Daigneault has instilled in this team over the last 3 or 4 years that have now come to full fruition and a lot of winning in recent history. The Oklahoma City Thunder would get a heck of a lot better with Bruce Brown, especially come playoff time. This is like their small buy move, okay? This isn't a ton to give up, but it's a notable increase in improvement over what they currently have. They trade Davis Bertans, they give up Aleksej Pokusevski, which I know some Thunder fans probably cry inside having to give him up. There was so much belief in him, but realistically, he's just not a core part of what Oklahoma City's doing. I think everyone has acknowledged that at this point. And for Toronto, maybe it's a fun upside swing, but what you're really getting is that 2024 first via the Los Angeles Clippers. They already have multiple first-round picks in this draft. They got 2 from the Indiana Pacers. They have their own if it stays in the top 6, which, assuming that they are going to continue to sell and enter a rebuild mode, it's likely that they do keep their pick this year. So you would actually have 4 first-round picks in 2024, and even if you don't plan on using all 4 of those, you could theoretically trade up in the draft if there's a guy you like at the top, especially in this draft where teams are probably going to be more willing to move down. This gives Toronto the possibility to maybe even move up to pick number 1 if they so desire. And it also gives you trade flexibility moving backward or trading for another player this offseason. If there's a guy that the Raptors really like that they want to put next to Scotty Barnes for the foreseeable future, well, they could start trade offers with 4 first-round picks. And that sounds alluring to other teams, especially when you look at the PR perspective and keeping fans engaged. Anytime you could trade someone for 4 first-round picks, it sounds like you had an absolute home run of a trade. So Toronto will have an interesting trade package to work with if they exercise something like this, while also getting Aleksej Pokusevski, who's maybe an upside swing as a second draft type of candidate. Then we move on to this package, and this is what I deem to be the best package in the entire video for Bruce Brown. And it's hard to find trades for $22 million players that I think work really well. Like for me, I think Bruce Brown makes actually a good deal of sense for a few different reasons. With Bruce Brown going to Sacramento, he gives you a guy who I think is going to subtly improve your defense. You do get a bit smaller here if you're Sacramento in terms of your actual lineup height and size, but I think Bruce Brown makes up for it with what he's going to be asked to do playing in that Harrison Barnes role at the power forward spot. He's athletic, quick, and he's another playmaker. And I think if you're looking at Sacramento's Zoom offense and the way that they're able to, kind of implore guys to go make plays, I think Bruce Brown fits actually very well into that as a downhill attacker. I think him and Sabonis would have a really unique chemistry, similar to what we saw between Jokic and Brown, but a little bit different. But I still think something that could be really nice as, again, another secondary playmaker behind Malik Monk and De'Aaron Fox. I think Bruce Brown fits in pretty well there in Sacramento. For Toronto, the reason that this makes a good deal of sense is you get Harrison Barnes, who is a good player. We all know he's a good player. He's not a great player anymore. He's not a high-quality starter anymore, but he's good. He's a player that you could probably trade a year from now and still get some value back for. Maybe you could even route him to a third team. Again, I'm going to say that out loud because they tend to not hear me. You could route Harrison Barnes to a third team and get a little bit more value for him in this deal. You get Davion Mitchell, a former lottery pick who hasn't necessarily worked out, but his nickname is Off Night for a reason. He's one of the better young defenders in the league. And I think if you're Toronto, you have Emmanuel Quickley. Give Davion Mitchell a chance to be a co-guard with him, someone who is going to defend across multiple positions. You have Scotty Barnes, who's already a super versatile defender. Davion Mitchell could help really build a defensive identity there in Toronto if you let him. And I still think that even though the offense hasn't come along quite the way that a lot of people hoped coming out of Baylor, maybe Davion Mitchell in a new situation, new scenery, a little bit more confidence instilled in him, and a fresh chance at new beginnings. Maybe you get everything that you're hoping to see out of him developmentally. And then you're also getting a 2026 first-round pick from the Sacramento Kings, which is lottery protected. For this deal to happen, the Kings would have to go to Atlanta and kind of change the protections currently on their pick, which is lottery protected this year from the Kevin Huerter trade. My assumption is that Atlanta would have reciprocity to that. They'd be open to making that type of move because the pick is likely going to convey anyway. So maybe the Hawks are just going to do it out of friendly, trying to build GM to GM relationships, or maybe the Kings even throw in like a small protected second round pick in there to kind of sweeten that deal for Atlanta if they so desire. But this is the type of package that gets Bruce Brown into Sacramento, gives the Raptors a couple of pieces to work with, and another first round pick in the door, giving them a pick surplus on top of what they already own in 2026 from the Pacers themselves, and just overall all of their other assets. I think it's a pretty good return for Bruce Brown. All right, I lied. I actually have a 9th trade here. I thought of it during the video and I wanted to add it in because I think it is something that is a small possibility. Now, I wouldn't bet on this happening, and never mind that it says Pacers on there. Fanspo hasn't updated the Bruce Brown trade yet, so they don't have Bruce Brown on the Raptors currently, so I have to do what I can to make this work for the video. But in this trade, DeJounte Murray goes to the Toronto Raptors, and they use some of those picks they got in that deal with the Pacers, those 2 first-round picks in 2024, plus Bruce Brown to Atlanta. And you might say, well, why would the Hawks do this? Why would they trade DeJounte Murray for this? They get 2 of those first-round picks back that they traded essentially to the San Antonio Spurs. So it's a decent asset acquisition back from that initial trade. You also get Bruce Brown to retrade. So it's kind of like what we're doing right now, talking about potential Bruce Brown retrade situations. The Hawks could theoretically do that, or they could even look at Bruce Brown as a fit long-term next to Trae Young, which would be an interesting component here too. You get 2 first-round picks and a player who hypothetically fits next to the 2 key players you want to keep in Jalen Johnson and, of course, Trae Young as well. So those are things that are, I think, worth considering. Again, if I had to bet on something, I would bet that this doesn't happen, but the idea that DeJounte Murray potentially could be a Toronto Raptor, very interesting. There's been a lot of speculation, especially when there were rumors about Siakam to the Atlanta Hawks. A DeJounte Murray Raptors move would be quite interesting, pairing him with Emmanuel Quickley in the backcourt going forward. There's a lot to break down, a lot to keep our eyes on moving forward. So if you guys did enjoy, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel for more content, and we'll catch you in the very next Utility Sports video.